Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're ready to start the Planning Committee, but as you can see, we're missing a chair at the moment because Councillor Morby is unfortunately not well. For the committee to proceed, I'd like to see if any members are prepared to put forward a motion for someone to act as chair today, please. Councillor Crick.
May I nominate Norma Parish, please?
Thank you, Councillor Crick. Is that seconded, Councillor Seaborn?
Yes.
Yes. Are you able to deal with that, Councillor Parish, on that basis? If members could just vote then to confirm that, please. All in favour? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, members.
I'd like to welcome you all to the planning meeting of the 18th of August. Thank you all for coming. I'd like to welcome those in the public gallery too, and those watching at home on the webcasting. Can I remind you to always speak into your microphones, otherwise the people watching at home won't be able to hear what you say. And please turn off your mobile phones and any other electronic devices you have, please. And we'll commence the meeting. Item 1, attendance and apologies. If you have any apologies, Rose?
Thank you, Chair. I have apologies from Councillors Evans, James, Taylor and Tomlinson.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, and Councillor Morby.
Oh, Councillor Morby. And I'm sure we'd all like to send our best wishes to Councillor Morby for a speedy recovery. I'm sure the officers will join in with that too. Thank you. Can I ask the officers to introduce themselves, please? Can I ask you on the end, to start, Tim, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Tim James, I'm the Assistant Chief Legal Officer. Thank you.
Ros Gwyn, I'm Committee Support Manager and I'll be writing the minutes today.
I'm Richard Lewis, I'm the Head of Development Management. I'm Paul Wielden, I'm Head of, Group Leader, Highway Development Control.
I'm Norman Jones, I'm Team Leader Applications, and I'll be presenting Agenda Item 4.
Thank you. Would the planning officers in the front like to do it, please?
Rachel Stanfield, I'm Planning Officer.
Helen Smith, Principal Planning Officer.
Craig Mead, Planning Policy Officer.
Thank you all for that. Oh, Councillor Seaborn, have you got apologies?
Yes, please. I wonder if you could record apologies for Councillor Neil Waite and Councillor Len Constance.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Right, we'll go on to item 2, declarations of interest. Over to the legal officer.
Thank you, Chair. The declarations I'm aware of at the moment, members, are as follows. Firstly, yourself, Chair, I believe you wish to declare a personal, non-prejudicial interest in relation to agenda items 4, 5 and 7, in each case on the basis that you're a member of Pontypool Community Council, which was consulted upon those applications. Is that correct, Chair?
That is correct.
Thank you. And then Councillor Powell, I believe you wish to declare a personal non-prejudicial interest in relation to applications 5, 6 and 8 on the basis that you're a member of Cwmbran Community Council, which was consulted upon those applications. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Councillor Ashley, I think exactly the same as Councillor Powell. Agenda items 5, 6 and 8. A member of Cwmbran Community Council who was consulted on the applications. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you, Councillor Ashley. And then Councillor Furzer, item 9 on the agenda. I believe you wish to declare personal non-prejudicial interest in relation to that item as a member of Blynavan Town Council who were consulted upon the application. Is that correct, Councillor Furzer? Thank you. Any other declarations, Councillor Burnett?
Yes, thank you, Tim. Application number 6, shopping pod for Asda.
Yes.
I'm an employee of Asda, but not in Cwmbran, in another part of the valley. But I am employed by Asda. So it's, I would say, personal but not prejudicial.
Yes, I would indicate, in my view, would be that it's a personal non-prejudicial interest on that basis,
Yeah.
Councillor Burnett.
Okay.
Thank you. If you could remember to sign register members. Please.
Yes, I will do that.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Item 3, minutes of planning meeting held on the 14th of July. They're on pages 5 to 8. Do you want to go through them for accuracy? Page 5, 6, 7 and 8.
Move, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you all agree they're a true record? Thank you. Any comments or anything members would like to make on them? No? Thank you. Right, the first planning application is on pages, I can find it, 9 to 14. And it's application number 15/P/00263, and the proposal is for conversion of a single dwelling house to 4 self-contained flats with individual kitchens and bathrooms located at Hilton, Waynfelin Road, Waynfelin, Pontypool. And it's over to Norman Jones, and he's going to give us a presentation on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As the committee can see, this is the application site. It's a semi-detached property. It's a large semi-detached property, which is the character of this row of properties. Accommodation is currently on 4 floors, which include a basement and accommodation in the roof space. And it is currently, I believe, a family house. We did refuse planning permission for an application to convert to 5 self-contained flats earlier in the year, and this has reduced it to 4. You've got a basement flat, you've got a ground floor flat with a communal area, and then flats at first and second floor in the roof space. Currently there are 2 parking spaces accessed off Waynfelin Road. It is proposed to accommodate 4 car parking spaces, albeit in a fairly constrained site, which would mean that one of these spaces would be allocated to the basement flat, which gains access via steps, and that detail would need to be worked out by the submission of a further plan, which is required by condition 3 of the application. This is the current situation. Here's the property. As I said, 2 vehicles can park in there. It is quite tight. There is a bus bay, bus stop platform outside, and obviously, as you see from the report, pardon me, quite a number of objectors have submitted oppose the application on the basis of attraction of further cars and parking along Waun-Felin Road, likely to lead to highway safety issues. That's the situation looking down the street. Next door has been some of the properties already been converted to flats with parking areas to the front. That's the situation looking south with these pillars currently in position. The situation isn't brilliant in terms of highway safety and parking. However, we consider that the proposal, which shows 4 parking spaces for 4 one-bedroom flats, is acceptable on balance, and we're recommending approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, before members go into their questioning, we have speakers, and the first speaker is Mrs. Jean Brill. Would you like to come down?
This lady is no longer speaking, so it'll just be noted.
Where's she gone?
She didn't speak, they didn't.
Okay.
That's what was
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
They will be referring to the plans that is in front that members have been distributed.
Yes, yeah. Mrs. Brill, when you'd like to start, you've got 5 minutes. Yes, I will ask the members now. Yes. Mrs. Brill is keen to know that we've all got the information she brought, with the plan. We've all got it. All members have one. Yes, Mrs. Brill, we've all got it. And if you press the green rectangle when you start and finish, and Mr. James will time you for 5 minutes, okay? Start whenever you're ready, okay?
As my speaking time is limited, I will leave it to other speakers to cover the issues of the already critical parking situation on Waun-Felin Road, which causes problems for lorries and fire engines entering School Lane and Waun-Felin Avenue. The likelihood of each Hilton flat having more than one car requiring additional on-road parking, the lack of provision for Hilton visitors, again requiring additional on-road parking, and population changes in the Waun-Felin ward resulting in an increase in car ownership. I have covered these issues in my written objection to this planning application. Despite planning's assertion, it is not viable to include 4 standard-sized 4.8 by 2.4 metre parking bays in the front garden of Hilton for the following reasons. It is commonly recognised that a standard-sized parking bay is too small for modern cars and 4x4s. This is especially true if there are other restrictions like adjacent walls and restricted space in front of the bay for turning and manoeuvring. A Ford Mondeo is too long to be parked within a standard bay. It would not be possible to squeeze between 2 4x4s centrally parked in adjacent bays. It should be noted that a Ford Fiesta is larger than the toy-sized cars shown on the submitted plans. Highway safety will require cars to be reversed into Hilton so that they can be driven forward onto Waun-Felin Road. Hence, there is no access to the passenger side of a car parked in Bay 4 because of the wall at the front and the wall on the right. It would not be possible to stand to the rear of a large car parked in Bays 3 or 4 and open their tailgates because of the wall on the right. Because of the proximity of the wall on the left, there is insufficient room for a car leaving Bays 2 or 3 to swing around in a single manoeuvre and avoid a collision between the middle of its passenger side and the front driver's side corner of a car in Bays 3 or 4. There is insufficient space for multiple manoeuvres. The provision of parking bay 1 is a nonsense. The driver could not get in or out of the car because of the wall on the left-hand side. The car would completely block access to the stairs. In the case of fire, access to the rear of Hilton would be blocked. It is commonly recommended that parking bays adjacent to a wall should be 3 metres wide to allow the driver access to the car. Thus, parking bay 1 should be 3 metres wide. a space is required between the rear of a car in Bay 1 and the extremely steep stairs to allow access to the car's tailgate. For a standard-sized parking bay, it is commonly recommended that this should be 1.2 metres. Highways suggest only 1 metre. This is insufficient to clear the bin surrounds, so the fire access would remain blocked. Even a space of 1.2 metres would constitute a health hazard because of the danger of stepping back onto very steep stairs. This is a potential health hazard that is not addressed in the planning's report. A 3-metre wide parking bay, positioned 1.2 metres from the stairs, would block the entrance exit from parking bay 2, making this bay unusable. Also, in the case of fire, access to the 4-floor high rear of Hilton would be compromised by the very existence of Bay 1. Even though I raised the issue of fire safety in my written objections, there is no assessment of fire safety in the planning's report. Planning claimed that the 4 parking spaces are in accordance with the CCS Wales Parking Standard 2008. This is not true, in that the parking bays in the standard are 2.6, not 2.4 metres wide. The distance between parking bays 2, 3 and 4 and the wall on the left is less than in the standard. 2.6 wide parking bays would prevent access to bay 2, even without bay 1 being moved forward. I therefore assert that it is not viable to include 4 parking bays in the small front garden of Hilton, a claim supported by the fact that the original planning application only proposed 3 parking bays, despite needing 5. There is no assessment in the planning's report of the potential road safety hazard resulting from the multiple on-road manoeuvres needed to access Hilton's angled parking bays in the proximity of a junction with limited visibility. It will not be possible to leave the angled bay Park 4 and swing around to travel south along Wainfellin Road without at least 2 manoeuvres on the road. It will not be possible to reverse into the angled parking bay 4, swinging around from the north, without at least 2 manoeuvres on the road. Cars parked on the road immediately to the north and south of the Hilton entrance would require even more on-road manoeuvres. This constitutes a road safety hazard which is increased by the proximity of the Wainfellin Avenue Road junction. In summary...
That's time now, Mrs Brill. Thank you.
The next speaker is Mrs Larkham, if she'd like to come down. Thank you, Mrs Larkham. And if you'd like to put your mic on and start whenever you're ready, and Mr James will time you for 5 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I am speaking on behalf of 45 Wainfellin Road as an objector to the planning application for 4 flats at Hilton, Wainfellin Road, on the grounds of parking. Current off-street parking for Hilton has space for 2 cars and is right next to the bus stop, which is directly opposite the entrance to Wainfellin Avenue. Next down to the bus stop is the entrance to flats, which has suitable parking for 6 cars. Vehicles drive out from the flats directly onto the bus stop, and vehicles from Hilton reverse out and again directly onto the bus stop. I use the entrance to Wainfellin Avenue at least twice a day and regularly experience visibility difficulties due to the age-old problem of irresponsible parking by residents and visitors to Wainfellin Road and Wainfellin Avenue, together with George Street School traffic. Added to the obstacles, I have to be extra vigilant by checking the entrances to both the flats and Hilton to ensure no vehicles are emerging. There is the added problem of people parking on the bus stop, again restricting access. On most days, it is inevitable that as soon as I start to manoeuvre out of the entrance to Wainfellin Avenue, a vehicle will be coming towards me down Wainfellin Road, requiring me to back up either into the entrance to Wainfellin Avenue or to reverse down Wainfellin Road. There are generally more cars behind me that are then required to manoeuvre accordingly. This sometimes requires mounting the curb as there is no other option. This situation is made worse if the stagecoach bus is trying to get through. If I am experiencing difficulties emerging from Wainfelling Avenue due to poor visibility, I believe that any vehicles emerging from Hilton have the same problem. And if planning is approved for 4 car spaces, even if the requirement is for them to drive out of the property and not reverse, I believe that the visibility and safety issues remain the same. I refer you to my photographic evidence. Further, there are 3 flats opposite my house, namely 4A, 4B and 4C Clavelli House, of which none of the occupants own vehicles and has no off-street parking. There are a further 3 flats next door to Hilton, namely Hillcroft, which has off-street parking for 2 cars which I believe belong to 1 flat, and the occupiers of the other 2 flats do not own vehicles. Should the aforementioned occupants of the flats acquire vehicles or new tenants have vehicles, this would create further parking issues. There is already inadequate parking on Wainfelling Road and the surrounding area, and I believe it is unreasonable to expect this stretch of road to accommodate any more flats. I am also very concerned that should a fire engine be required in this area, it would have great difficulty in gaining easy access to any properties. I also point out that Wainfelling Road houses the ambulance station, again requiring quick and easy access. I suggest the Planning Committee arrange a site meeting if they have not already done so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Larkham. The next speaker now is Mr. Jones, the applicant, please. It's on the front, Mr. Jones. Right, start whenever you're ready, and Mr. James will time you for your 5 minutes. Thank you.
Ma'am, as you've heard, I am the applicant in this situation, and I've occupied and developed the property in Hilton over the past 10 years. The property has been sympathetically restored. It maintains all its original Victorian internal features and will do so even following the development. The applicant, in this case me and my wife, we own a number of residential properties which are let. These 4 units are already in high demand and they will be used within the existing property portfolio. I will personally be responsible for vetting and appraising tenants. And Mr. Jones will tell you there, if he could just slide the show just one part, you'll see that as you face Hilton, the property on the left is a double-fronted large property which is owned and maintained by a local housing association. That has provision for 8 vehicles to be parked. Now, I can tell you, ma'am, as a matter of fact, because I live next door, that it is always 40% minimum underutilised. It is highly likely that owners or tenants of the proposed development will not have motor vehicles. Some might. It is pure conjecture to say that some families might have 2 vehicles. Indeed, but why shouldn't they? But I can tell this committee from my personal experience in living at Hilton, where I still do, that no one's quality of life in this room will be affected detrimentally by this development. The proposal has been recommended for approval by your own professional officers, both highways and planning itself. It is envisaged that a maximum 4 parking spaces can be provided. The reason that the earlier application was refused, it wasn't refused because of contest, it was refused because it was submitted by architects who felt that the very sustainability of Hilton, it is right next to a bus stop, right next to a cycle route, right next to a small school, could actually minimise the impact, and there was a possibility of an extra unit being obtained to give what is much needed in this area, single person, single unit accommodation. Now, although it pains me to say this, there is an element of difficulty on Wainfallin Road during school hours because there is a very popular infant school down the road in the close proximity of two of the objectors who've heard today. Now, their objection strayed onto the infrastructure rather than the application which is before you. Now, you've read the report and you've seen that Miss Hensby, who's prepared it, has outlined what she considers to be the relevant matters affecting the application. There will be no change to visual appearance or design. Residential amenity will not be affected. Highway safety, that hurdle has been overcome and has been approved by our local authority's own highways officer. Now, I can tell you again from personal knowledge, I don't want to stray into conflict, but if Mr. Jones again could show the site plan, the major plan, that you'll see the area of Hilton is outlined in red. If you look to the right of that application, you'll see, of that delineation, you'll see 4 or 5 further substantial properties along the way toward the right, which will lead you up eventually to the playing field. Now, those
one further minute, Mr. Jones.
1 minute?
Yeah.
Those properties are gated by the owners. They have off-road parking facilities. They can each park as much as 2 vehicles, but they also choose to gate their fronts as well, which actually makes the position worse as far as off-roading parking is concerned. It's a very, very large stretch of the road, and if more thought was given, a lot of the perceived problems can be eradicated here. I would urge you to support the application.
Right, thank you. I'll wait for you to get back to your seat, and then I'll ask the officers to... I'll wait for you to get back to your seat, and then the officers will answer all the queries that have been brought up. Right. Do you want to start, Norman,
yes,
or the Highways Officer? Right, Norman.
I'll come back.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Coming back on some of the issues that were raised, Mrs. Brill raised the fact that no mention was made of the fire escape issue. However, if planning approval was granted and the permission was implemented, clearly there would be a requirement for building regulations approval in terms of the conversion works, and the account would be taken of the access to all of the flats in such conversion works. The application proposes standard parking spaces. These are the normal standard spaces that we use. Clearly, to a certain degree, there will be potential for conflict if people don't park in the proper manner. However, whilst the site is fairly restricted, and that is recognised, the people, if they are car owners, will obviously hopefully make suitable arrangements to access the cars, being a passenger or the driver. There is a possibility that the occupiers of the flats won't have vehicles. However, what we're doing and what the applicant has done is to make as much provision as is possible within the application site to maximise off-street parking. Mrs. Larkham obviously made reference to other houses in multiple occupation where there is no off-street parking. She made also reference to certain flats where the occupiers don't have vehicles. However, we can't obviously control that, who will have vehicles. But as I say, on balance, we feel that the parking has been maximised within the site. As has been indicated, Winefelling Road is busy. However, that is an existing situation, and we feel that on balance that we can approve this application subject to the conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The Highways Officer now will answer the queries.
Thank you, Chair. There's no doubt that in valley areas, particularly Pontypool, Abersychan, even as far down as Cwmbran, there are problems on the existing highway infrastructure. There are very often, you will see in terraced areas, and you will see in semi-detached areas, detached areas, you will always see reversing parking manoeuvres from parking areas within the frontages of development. This isn't a lot different, to be honest, to a lot of other areas that you would see throughout the valley. You would see cars reversing onto the road. You would see schools near housing areas. You would see bus stops. What we have got to do as highway engineers is to try and, we've got to demonstrate that something will cause significant harm to the highway network. Now, really, a couple of car parking spaces in the frontages of property, and bear in mind that there are many, many, many properties that have similar circumstances such as this, we could demonstrate would harm the highway network. Well, we can't do that. No doubt, I agree with the speakers that this site is tight. There is no doubt about it. The spaces are 2.4 metres wide, and CSS Wales standards say 2.6, but normally you would expect to see that in new housing areas. What we try and do in the older areas is to try and maximise and get what we can. And you can see from the plans that they do show 4 reasonable parking spaces for reasonable size vehicles. So it would be really, really difficult from a highway standpoint to stand here and say we would oppose this application. We agree with the speakers. It is tight. We agree that there are certain things that happen on the highway network that we don't particularly like, but that happens everywhere. And we've got to demonstrate that this application will cause significant harm, and we can't. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Would members like to ask questions now? Councillor Crickening.
Thought I'd put it on. I note on the photograph there appears to be either a telegraph pole or an electric feed pole. It doesn't look like a lamppost. Can you advise me what it is?
Sorry, Chair. I think it's it looks like it's electricity pole, electricity feed pole. You can see the yellow Pergil sticker on it.
That's what I wondered.
And the stay is actually in the bus border platform, so that will stay.
So I just wondered, looking at this and looking at the manoeuvrability on this site, which is extremely tight, whether it be possible to reduce the width of the wall back from 3.5 metres, which would mean moving that pole as well, and whether that would at least make access, ingress and exit much easier than it might otherwise be.
The pole and the is by the bus border platform, which is to the left-hand side of the access. So you wouldn't be able to widen it in that direction because it's somebody else's land. Where Norman is pointing there is the boundary of the property. There is a possibility that you could possibly widen it on the right-hand side, but that wouldn't necessarily give you too much more too much more room to manoeuvre, and it would lessen on-street parking provision for somebody else. Because what tends to happen, you've got to strike a balance between providing parking space for residents And then if we widen the access, we take away on-street parking for somebody else. It's always a balance.
It's just when you look at the diagram, it's very apparent if number one wished to stay indoors all day, number two would be stuck.
According to the plan that you have in front of you, which I'm assuming is this larger scale plan, that is the case. But the plan that came with the application was different to that. It did show that on the plan it does say space exclusively for basement flat as it blocks the stairs. But space 1 and 2, space 1 could manoeuvre. But like I have said, I agree with the residents that it is tight. There is no doubt about it. And there has to be some compromise with the residents that actually live there. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't.
Thank you. Are there any illustrations to demonstrate to members the difference, in these sketches that we've got, the ones that Mrs. Mrs. Brill brought in, and
in terms
and
of
the planning ones?
Chair, obviously I think the plans that Mrs. Brill has presented shows this parking bay moved forward by 1.2 metres. What we've done is, if you note, is that condition 3 still requires a parking scheme to be, details of the parking scheme to be submitted for our approval. So in terms of the gap for access to the stairway leading to the basement flat and the actual marking out of areas, that is the subject of a condition as proposed.
Thank you for that. Veronica, you want to come back in?
Just on one point, very often today people bring their work vehicles home with them, and they're often much larger than the standard car. How would that impact on this in the terms of any conditions that we set?
In terms of any conditions, we wouldn't attempt to cover that by a planning condition. However, it would be up to the management of this property. Obviously, the applicant stated he currently owns a number of properties, and if we would expect that to be covered through the management of the property.
Thank you. Councillor Power?
Thank you, Chair. Just more of a comment, really. We've sort of heard from two of the speakers that it's actually quite unlikely that there'll be full occupancy with of car ownership going on. And also that, in the past we've given dispensation to new builds even to have less than one parking space per bedroom. So perhaps just a comment from the officers where that would leave us, if we've done that in the past and then we were to turn this down when they've offered CCS regulatory spaces.
Thank you. Do you want to come in now, Councillor Burnett?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. Thank you, Norman. I'm sure we all have concerns, as we know, with the valley towns, and it's so narrow. I do have concern with the bus stop there. And I don't know if it's like Cwmbran every 10 minutes or what the timetables are on the buses. And as we look at the car parking there, I personally wouldn't want to be reversing into there because I'm dreadful at reversing. And all I can see is somebody coming home, can't be bothered to reverse and they'll park on the road today. And we talk about some of the residents might not even have a car, but then we could talk about 4 residents that have double occupancy which have 8 cars. So some might not have them at one time, and as when the speaker said, some of the other areas haven't all got cars, but when the other people move out, and we could have 4 flats there, 4 cars, and if they double up, we've got 8 cars. So we do have a problem on these roads, I know. Again, I'll go back to the bus stop. It's worrying if the bus is pulling up, but depending on the timetable. As you said, Norman, not quite happy with the health and safety, but you will accept it. It is difficult. But until this develops, we've got to see what's going to happen. Looking into getting 4 cars in that space, I have my doubts on it. But as 4 flats, 1 bedroom, desperate for properties, we know. Desperate. What is one question I'll ask? I mean, it's been mentioned in my area about the development there, and we had to try and find out more parking spaces. There's a lot of 1 bedroom developments there. And had to have 2 parking spaces, yet we'll accept 1 parking space. What is the criteria on new build and old build?
Clearly, you know, in the past, we have accepted in certain areas within the town centres no provision in terms of conversion. Clearly, this is a out of town suburban residential area where there is a lot of on-street parking, and so what the applicant is trying to achieve is the best available on-site. Clearly, he came in with an application for 5 units earlier in the year. We felt that on balance that shouldn't be supported. However, 4 spaces for 4 one-bedroom flats, we feel that on balance we can support that, subject to the condition requiring the details, further details to be submitted.
Thank you. I think the Highways Officer would like to come in on this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I could go back to Councillor Powell first and then Councillor Burnett. That will perhaps answer the 2 is the similar sort of question. Is what we normally work to is CSS Wales standard, which is County Surveyor Society Wales. And for new build, it's normally 1 space for 1 bedroom, 2 spaces for 2 bedrooms, 3 for 3, and a maximum of 3. So the maximum on site would be 3 for 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms. It would be 3. And there's a section in there on residential conversions as well. And residential conversions in areas such as this tend to be 1 for 1 bedroom, 2 for 2 bedroom, 3 for 3 bedroom. But there is something in there where it gives you an allowance for, because of the area itself is a conversion area, it gives you some scope for flexibility. Well, we're not really given much flexibility in here, only in that we're accepting car parking spaces which are slightly below what are the standard size of space within CSS Wales. And we normally do that for conversions because otherwise we wouldn't have any development, you know, and it's awful difficult for us as highway officers to oppose planning applications on parking provision when it's at or very near what you would expect to see within the standards. So it's 1 for 1 bed, 1 for 1, 2 for 2. So we're not out on this one, except for the size, which we recognise. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ashley, you'd like to come in now?
Yeah, well, you somewhat answered the question I was going to ask, because funny enough, we're looking at a bus stop, aren't we? And there's 2 buses an hour go up and down there, by the way, because I sit and look at them every day, or used to when I worked in Pontypool. So that's your answer. But it was interesting, the developer said that the person that's developing this house said that there's a possibility they wouldn't have any houses at all. You certainly couldn't put any more than 4 around there for that house, could you? Because they'd be all over the place. It is interesting what you said about 1 bedroom flat, 1 thing, but any more than that. And you have to ask the question, what if they had bicycles or other things? Where would they put them? I say that because there's a problem if you've ever lived in a converted house where you put a bike, because they become a nuisance. And if you look in certain places in Cwmbran, they hang them off balconies and all over the place. And then you think like recycling. No, there's a whole lot of issues involved in things like this. It's not just cars.
You don't need an answer, do you? That was a comment, was it? Okay, thanks. Right. Does anyone else want to ask a question or make an observation? No? Oh, Veronica, you want to come back in?
Just an observation, thinking about the proximity of the bus stop, which is clear there, and the proximity to the junctions in the road. Any car parking on the road is going to be restricted because of those corners and those junctions. Is there yellow lines at the moment around those junctions?
We'll ask the officers. Are there yellow lines?
No, there are no significant yellow lines in this particular area. As you could probably see, there's a lot of on-street car parking there, and that's needed. That's necessary, so we wouldn't necessarily go along and put double yellow lines down where there's nowhere for people to park. With regard to the bus stop, it is close to the access, and you would reasonably expect people not to park in that bus stop, which improves the situation of access at this particular location because it frees up some better visibility from the access. So everything has got its balance within the highway network. You've got some things which help out other things, and the location of a bus stop there, you've got a frequency of probably one every half hour, so it's not as if it's parked up there all the time. And it probably would allow the access to be kept clear of parked cars, which would improve visibility as you're reversing out. So there's always benefits and disbenefits of everything. It's demonstrating that it's significant enough for you to oppose it, is the thing.
Right, any more questions? Would somebody like to make a proposal? Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move the officer's recommendations, subject to the conditions supplied within the report.
Is there a seconder for that? Right. We can vote on that now then. Would you like to have a show of hands? Thank you. I think that's unanimous. So this application has been approved. Thank you. I'm sorry, I can't answer questions through the public. Well, I don't know whether the officers were aware of that. Right.
Members have made their decision. Photographs have been displayed.
Right. Yeah. Photographs have been displayed. Whether they would have made a difference, I wouldn't have thought so. But thank you for your comments. Anyway, this application has been approved. Thank you. Right. We'll go on to item agenda 5, which is application number 15/P/00271, and the proposal is for application for reserved matters approval, appearance, landscaping, layout and scale in respect of 210 dwellings, including associated roads and infrastructure, located at land west of Cwmbran Drive, South Sebastopol. And I think Helen Smith, you're going to do a presentation on this? Yes. Oh, Norman, is it? Oh, Helen, you're there. Yeah. Thank you, Helen. You go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the application we're here to consider today is a reserved matters application for the development at South Sebastopol. It's the first phase for the detailed application that we've received so far. Members will recall that outline planning permission was granted, an amended application was granted in October last year, and this is the approved master plan for the area. The first phase that we're looking at today is this phase along here, which includes the two main access points which were agreed as part of the outline planning permission. It includes the adjacent to the property to the site is some residential properties, Wren's Nest cottages. There's a listed hay barn here, and then the listed farmhouse at Tir Brychiad. Here we have the detailed layout of the first phase. As part of the outline planning permission, a development brief for the site was required. The Phase 1 development brief has been approved, where it set out the vision and the character for this particular phase. The vision, which has been approved in that development brief, is to try and create a feel of a traditional village Here we have the main access points. This is the new Cwmbran roundabout, roundabout on Cwmbran Drive, leading into the site. And this road here will form part of the main spine road, which will then give access to the remainder parts of the site. Here we have Bevans Lane with Avondale Road roundabout here. Here we have just some sample street scenes which will demonstrate the character of the properties and the careful consideration to the design and the materials which have been used. This is on the main spine road. This is actually at the entrance to the site, looking from the new roundabout on Cwmbran Drive. And here we have some more sample ones from within the development. This view is opposite the hay barn, and this is on the main route again. There's lots of different variety of house types, including some garages and some flats above, leading into little courtyards within the development. And these street scenes here, these face Tidbrychiad Farmhouse, the listed properties. And then these face onto the cycleway. The applicant has demonstrated in his submission that it does comply with the ES mitigation which has been set out as part of the outline planning application, and also the development brief for the site, and also the conditions in terms of the outline in the construction environment management plan also still apply in this case. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Any questions from members? Councillor Powell.
Yeah, you're probably going to hear quite a lot from me on this one. But to start off, turning to page 21, which talks about policies. 2 points. First is around social housing. So I understand that for the whole site it's the 14% minimum agreed, and obviously this section of it falls well below that. Just a point that doesn't show great commitment that they're not, we haven't started with the sort of commitments to the social housing aspect. But the question is around sustainable sort of housing. Do we know what energy saving features there will be in the design of these houses? I read the report on sort of the architectural design, but will there be sort of things like solar panels going in?
Yeah. There are no solar panels proposed as part of this development. As you may be aware, the Planning for Sustainable Buildings, the technical advice note, is no longer in force, as the Welsh Government have powers over this area in terms of building regulations. So the applicant will have to comply with the building regulations for the site. In terms of the sustainability, a lot of the projects these days on the market are higher spec than they used to be, and the developers are aware, but there's no specific renewable energies in terms of solar power.
Did you want to continue, Councillor Powell?
Yeah, if you want to let me.
Yes,
there's
yes,
a few more to go through.
Okay.
Relating to page 18, talking about diversion of footpaths, etc. Are any of these public rights of way or anywhere else on site? And if they are, will any be diverted, and how will it be done?
Yeah, if I take you back to the site layout, we have had detailed discussions, pre-application discussions with the footpaths officers. There are a couple of registered public footpaths throughout the site. Obviously, you've got the national cycle route through the site, which is to be maintained. There will be some diversion orders. And what we've tried to do is, where they are to be rerouted, is to give careful consideration over the setting of those. For example, there is one which is being diverted up along here, and what we tried to do is try and keep the rural feel of that footpath, rather than try and divert them along the footways adjacent to the highways. Where possible, they have been put along the frontage of the properties where there's no vehicular access. So the footpath officers have been engaged in this development right from the pre-app stage, and they will have to go through the whole process of the formal diversion orders as well.
Do you want to carry on, or Councillor Ashley has indicated? You can carry on, Councillor Powell, if you want to. Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
I got a list as well.
Okay, thanks for that. That's really brilliant. Yeah, relating to page 37, and there was an issue brought up by Friends of the Earth Turbine about the glowworm habitat. So the question is, at the moment I understand that along the cycleway, Torvine sort of manages their habitat. Will that continue, or will it that go to the South Sebastopol Ecological Steering Group? And just quickly related to that, I understand that the final management plan for the steering group for the ecological side of it, and the construction environmental management plan hasn't gone forward for approval yet. Are there any conditions going to go into this that that will be taken into consideration, even if sort of outline planning goes forward?
Yeah, the outline management plan is a requirement of the Section 106 agreement, which is attached to the outline planning permission. There is an issue with the timing. They have to submit that for approval to the council prior to the issuing of any detailed planning permission. The applicant's currently working with us in terms of preparing a draft of the outline management plan with a view of taking it to the environmental steering group before formal submission to us for consideration. I believe that may take place in September. We haven't got final dates on that yet. Once that outline management plan is submitted to us, then we do various consultations, which include Torvine Friends of the Earth and NRW and Gwent Wildlife Trust. And then hopefully we'll be in a position to approve that document. That document will be then used and be updated as all the phases progress. That document then is going to be used for the eventual management company of the site to manage it in accordance with those specifications in that document. In terms of glowworms, it was the principles of mitigation and management were set out in the outline environmental statement. That will be brought through to the detailed outline management plan, and the actual specifications on how they will be and the timings of the mitigation will be set out in that document.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Ashley, would you like to start your questioning?
Thank you. Hello again. I was very interested reading through this because it's the first time we've seen some of the detail of the housing here, the style your conservation officer has described, I thought, in great detail, the various aspects mixed. It's the first time we've seen this. Now, we've seen some of this before when the Lantarnum development was an example of that as well. Now, I'm fascinated by the developments, and some of it they like and some of it they don't like. Now, it would be useful to have an illustration of that. I know we're at the outline stage at the moment, but what I thought was really interesting, because in another, I remember we put one through for canal side stuff. Some of this stuff is quite complex for planning committee to actually visualise, and this is done here. Some of it they don't like and some of it they don't like. I mean, I've got an idea of what it looks like, because I've seen some of this stuff in another committee I'm on, and I think we need to know what it looks like. I'm not saying if we do an outline on this, it's fair enough. That's the one comment on that. Do you want me to do the other comments I've got, or do you want? Yes, we would.
So, just in terms of what it looks like, in terms of the
this is the aesthetics and also the construction of it, because I can see what it's about. You know.
Yeah, we have got, for every house type, we have got detailed drawings. We couldn't put them all up because there are so many of them and slight different variations. But what we tend to do is ask for street scenes, so we can see how they've placed each property next to each other and how they work and relate to each other. So these drawings give you a very clear indication of what it will eventually look like. In terms of the materials, what the developers have done is specify there's going to be a mix of white render, coloured render, which we can see here. There's also going to be stone and some brick. We've actually asked for samples of all those materials, so we're happy with the mix. Just want to make sure that the actual final product that they're going to use is satisfactory.
Thank you there. I mean, some of us have looked at other developments similar to this. You know, you've got various other places where they've done And obviously, are we going to get a view of this when it before? Is this the final sort of go at this, or are we going to get the actual? It's not so much the aesthetics as the built environment that I'm trying to get out of.
Right. This is the applicants have submitted these for detailed planning approval. So if it's approved, once they've complied with all the various conditions, they can actually then go and start building it then. And then then again, each phase, then we'll come back to you with, again, all the detailed drawings of all the houses for future development, for future phases. Sorry, does that answer your query?
Yeah, the other thing that was brought up there, which is something that those of us that sit in the new town know quite well, was obviously the thing about Kirtledge and the way that was impacted. I noted that greatly in here. I'll leave that at the moment because I think you've answered that reasonably well. The other aspects of this, as I said, I've got a bit of a list here, was on my favourite subject, cycleways, and noticed that the cycleway, there was some talk about surfacing the cycleways. I also noted we seem to have developed a sort of turbine way of doing cycleways, the 3-metre cycleways. Are we, nothing in that in here actually says we're going to have a 3-metre cycleway or replace like with like. Now, obviously, if we could guarantee that, you've said that the cycleway is going to be done there, but you didn't actually stipulate that it was going to be a 3-metre cycleway or like with like. I'd like to see that in there if possible.
In terms of the cycleways, we've got the existing cycleway along here. That, the only way that's going to be impacted on is with the crossings of the roads. The route of it will remain as it is. But we have asked for details of the crossing points just to make sure that those are adequate in terms of safety for cyclists and pedestrians. Then another route will be a Bevans Lane, and that the width will remain the same as that.
I mean, in all honesty, some of that Bevans Lane route there is substandard, so if we can get it upgraded, that would be quite good. But I say that. The other aspect which touches on which stuff that Councillor Powell was talking about was the ecological management plan, which and there were some other aspects in here which was habitat and bat conservation, which is the NR8. I presume that will be covered in a management plan with it, but they were particularly keen on bats and otters and water courses. That aspect, I think, I'd like to see drawn out a bit more, and I'll finish on that. I'm sure other members have got things on that as well.
Okay. In terms of the ecology and the bats, in this particular phase, there's a requirement on the Outline Planning Commission to actually update all the surveys for each before they come in with each particular phase. So we've got those updated surveys, and they've also reviewed the environmental statement to make sure that this detailed application does comply with all those mitigation measures.
You satisfied, Councillor Ashley? Yeah. Councillor Crick now.
Thank you. Some of this has partly been covered, but I'd just like to go over it again. Looking at page 25 in particular, the Conservation Officer, who I believe was the author of 24-25, and on to the next page, does refer quite specifically to quite a few of the buildings and his concerns in their relation to the original listed buildings which are in place. The 3-storey at Plot 9 is too close to the old farmhouse, which is Grade 2 registered, not in the local vernacular. The double garage front is Dominate, and the 2 single garages next to it. You've got reference to the Wren's Nest area being the 3-storey again being dominant compared to the original building, and a mechanical design is the comment made. Have all these different points, and there's more and more and more, as you know, which one could refer to, actually been considered with regard to the angle of the eaves as well, not being sympathetic sympathetic to the vernacular as well, which presumably could also impact then on whatever sort of solar panels were put on too. Have they been dealt with satisfactorily? Because it seems to be glossed over at the end. That's my first question.
Yeah, the Conservation Officer made some comments in terms of the general design of the properties. Our main concern in terms of the conservation issues were the impact on the settings of the listed buildings, which are the hay barn and the farmhouse. So we've sent all the comments from our Conservation Officer to the applicants. As a result of that, in terms of the details in relation to the listed buildings, the applicants actually amended the scheme in line with his comments. So, for example, where he mentioned the three-storey element in this location, the house type was changed to a different house type, which is more suitable in that location. The other issue which he raised was the detailed design of the apartment building, which was here. If I take you to one of the street scenes. Here we go. You can just see it here. This is an amended scheme because the initial drawing, whilst not significantly different, just the detailed design issues have been changed to take into account his comments. And in terms of the individual comments on particular house types, we recognise that the most important element was actually next to the listed buildings because we have a statutory duty to protect their settings. But we were of the opinion that the remainder of the site, they were very well designed. And whilst he did raise a couple of little issues in terms of the details of the other properties, then they weren't a significant objection from him. And following reconsultation on the amended scheme, he has actually withdrawn his objection, and that the majority of his previous concerns have been adequately addressed, and he had no further objections.
Thank you. The other questions I've got are in connection with conservation. Much is made of the meadow, which is an extremely rare G5 one, I believe. What is going to be done to preserve that? Because I wasn't entirely clear. And there's also comments by, I'm not sure which group it was, but one of the groups, that where there are green spaces and footpaths proposed, that they be mown areas. And I just wondered what the comments back were with regard to those.
Yeah, that was Gwent Wildlife Trust who raised those issues. In terms of, there's MG5 in a couple of places across the whole site. This only relates to a part of the site. And the application site is actually the red line, which you can see around this drawing. So the MG5 is in this location here, but it's actually outside of this particular planning application site. It's going to form part of the next phase. So although this plan does show these footpaths here, if this plan is approved, it wouldn't include those details. The ecological management plan, that will cover how the MG5 area will be managed so that it retains its ecological value. And also the construction environmental management plan, which is required under a condition, that will set out how it will be protected during the construction of the development.
I've no further questions.
Thank you. Any questions from any other members or comments? Right. Are you ready to make a proposal? Councillor Seaborn, you want to make it?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to move the officer's recommendation subject to the various conditions.
A vote on that now, please. Right. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. That planning application has been approved. We go on to agenda item 6. which is application number 15P00275. The proposal is the erection of a home shopping pod, van loading canopy, customer click and collect canopy, and reconfiguration of the internal access road within the Collie car park. The location is Asda Stores Limited, Llewellyn Road, Cwmbran, and is on pages 53 to 60. And Rachel Standfield is going to explain first of all. Or is it? Rachel. Yeah? She's going to explain the plan, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. This shows an outline of the application site. It's the car park to the east of the Asda store in Cwmbran Town Centre. And the proposal is for a new building immediately adjacent the existing store with a van loading capacity. So that's towards the north of the plan. To provide for internet shopping, loading vans and for them to undertake the deliveries. There's also a click and collect facility proposed towards the bottom part of the site, that's it, where customers would come and collect their pre-ordered shopping. The works involve the reconfiguration of the car park, which is currently designated for staff only. So there would be some implications for the relocation of staff car parking, which is proposed that they use the Glyndŵr Road long stay car park off Glyndŵr Road. Yeah, I think that covers it.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from members? Councillor Powell.
Again. No, just one. With the click and collect point, I'm just not very good at working it out. Is that sort of a car click and collect point, or is it on foot? And if it's not, are there sort of bays for people to park? Because I can't imagine anyone's going to be collecting on foot, as it were, you know.
Please.
Yes, certainly. It's a car-based operation.
Councillor Crick.
Thank you. I'm not clear, Chair, from the drawings or from what I've read, how many car parking positions there are for the click and collect. Now, I've used some of these with John Lewis in different places, and very often you can end up at certain times of the year with long queues.
Certainly. There aren't actually any parking spaces allocated for the click and collect. They're proposing a one-way system whereby you drive in on the southern side, swing round to the north, and then there are two bays which can be pulled into for the loading of an actual collection of the shopping, and then out again through the site. So there are two actual bays for picking up the shopping, but no parking as such to wait.
Councillor Burnett.
If I could explain how click and collect works, working for the company, we have it in our store. It's like a car wash. You come in, you drive in, you press the button, give them all your details, out comes the parcel, a bit like McDonald's. You click in one side, and then they come out, give you a parcel, and off you go, and that's it. It's just like a car wash, but actually they've got a double one going to Cwmbran there. We have a single one, but they pull in. Really doesn't cause a lot of problems at all with any traffic.
Councillor, do you want to come back in, Councillor Crick?
If I may, I do find that hard to believe that it doesn't cause any problem, knowing how busy it is going round the circuitry of Cwmbran. Normally, when you come to periods like Christmas, having something like this and only two bays seems insufficient to me.
If you're an expert, Councillor, your expertise.
With click and collect, I mean, the way Asda work it, I mean, it's going to be, looks like it's in the car park, and it's not, it's in the original car park. So it's in those cars, I mean, it's not public car park, so it's not, the only cars that are going in it are the people clicking and collecting, it's not public. and it really, in our store, doesn't, because it's 24/7. I mean, they'll be there till 10 o'clock, and it really doesn't cause much problem at all. But because it's in the car park, or the colleague car park anyway, it's only the public that they're picking up that would be in there anyway.
Does the planning officer want to come in on that too?
Yes, thank you. This is only from my personal experience, but when I've done click and collect myself, you have to allocate yourself a time slot. So I'm assuming that the store would manage the maximum number of cars that would come within, say, a 2-hour time period. So it wouldn't necessarily be a free-for-all of, streams of cars coming at any one point.
I've used it elsewhere, but given where you are in terms of the circular road, where you come in off of it to where the present staff car park is, and then have to go back out again, I can see that causing problems in an area which at the moment is very difficult, say on a Saturday morning, to get in and out of, and at Christmas time can be horrific. You've also got quite close to that area the post office where people come to pick up their parcels because they've not been delivered. It's perhaps going to be more problematic than is being suggested.
Do you want to comment on that? Or?
No, nothing more to say.
Okay, right, thank you. Councillor Ashley, you've got a query?
Yeah, I've got a query. I remember last year there were a couple of occasions when we actually had a traffic jam going round there because it was Christmas period. Councillor Crick's right. And what it was, around the main road, because you get a block, and if you've got stuff going round there and you've got it trailing round, because that does get blocked up in there. The other question I was going to say is, one wants to collect, which I do with a bicycle, funny enough. I'd be interested to get in there, because we do have about 40% of people who do the town centre without cars, because of the wonderful trolley problem we have. So maybe they want to go there and click and collect with trolley, or bicycle, or on foot, because we do actually. So I'd be interested to see how people are going to access that. Because they might want to do it with a taxi even. Because there's lots and lots of taxis in Cwmbran.
Would taxis be going to this area then? To pick up? No, I hadn't thought of that.
Number of taxis in the whole of Wales in Cwmbran, or one of the biggest lots of taxis. It's a very big taxi population.
Okay. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. One maybe small concern is, of course, because that entrance to come through, of course, it onto the backs of other shops as well. Have there been any concerns from there about when they themselves have deliveries? Has any?
The highways officer will come in and explain that to you.
Thank you, Chair. You note my comments within the report, and my comments were about losing car parking provision, really. I didn't really comment on the town centre itself and the vehicular trips that would be associated with this, and the congestion in a particular area, and all what happens on the existing highway network, because I don't really see a problem with this being located where it is, but I do recognise that there is congestion in this particular area at certain times. But this proposal is not going to add to that in any great extent. I mean, it's a click and collect area. Notwithstanding, I understand what Councillor Crick is saying in her experience. There can be difficulties, but I wasn't too concerned about the effect that it would have on the existing highway network.
Thank you. Any more queries or questions from members? Councillor Crick again. Right.
Only, again, given the highways officer has just said about his concerns, do you think it is going to be a problem for parking increasing in Northville and Southville, because particularly at busy times of the year. We see it happen anyway. Whilst we've got Morrison's now, which provides extra parking spaces, that itself is full at Christmas times and on weekends, and we all know what it's like to try and get down to the town and round it and find a car parking space as it is.
Right, thank you. Would the Highways Officer comment, please?
Thank you, Chair. You can see my comments within the report. There's a real difficult issue for me here, in that I did say about Northville, and there could be a possible effect on Northville because of all the staff. I think there are something like 60 staff spaces being lost, and they got to be displaced elsewhere. But the town centre people, management people, didn't object to it, and they say they can be accommodated in sort of Glyndŵr car park. But there's a real difficult issue I've got is the fallback position, because this, you've all probably read what the content of what I've said in the report, but there's a real difficult issue which Richard has brought up in the report as well, is that there is a fallback position, and the fallback position is they don't have to provide any staff car parking. So I think we've got to be thankful that we've got the other 40. So. And again, it's this balancing situation again that we're in all the time, you know. We know that it's congested within this area, but we can't stop business, you know.
Thank you for that. Any other comments or queries? Would anybody like to make a proposal? Thank you, Councillor Seaborn.
I'd like to move the officer's recommendation subject to the conditions supplied on page 59 and 60.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Right, are we ready to vote? Okay, then we'll have a show of hands. I think that's unanimous. So this application too has been approved. Thank you. Right, we'll go to agenda item 7. Application number 15/P/000379. The proposal is for a single-storey rear extension located at 63 Park Panteg, Sebastopol, and it's on pages 61 to 64. And there's no presentation on this, I don't think. Yes, yeah.
Just to let you know, you'll note from this report that the only reason this is on here is because it's made by a senior member of the leadership team. Otherwise, we'd have dealt with it under delegated powers.
What are your wishes? Oh. Councillor Cameron's got a hand up. So,
I propose, subject to any conditions, that we approve it.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Right, about 3 seconders. Councillor Seaborn seconded. Right, we'll go into a vote then. That's unanimous again. Thank you, members. So that's been approved. We go on to agenda item 8, which is application number 15/P/000394, proposal for modification to Section 106 agreement dated 21st of September 2011, as varied by deed dated 19th of March 2012 and later by deed dated 23rd of March 2015, located at Merita HVBS UK Limited, Grange Road, Cumbran, is on pages 65 to 75. And I think Richard's going to lead us into this first of all. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Craig is going to just give you some background to this application in a moment, but just to clarify the legal context, as you'll notice, it's not a usual planning application. Under Section 106A, subsection 1, a planning obligation or a planning agreement may be modified by agreement between the Council and the person or persons against whom the obligation is enforceable. The key word there is agreement. This isn't something that we can approve, it's something that we agree with the other parties. That's if the agreement is not more than 5 years old. In this particular case, the planning obligation that we're talking about in relation to Meritor was entered into on the 21st of September 2011. So because it's within 5 years, we can agree, as long as the Council and the other party agree, a modification to that agreement. The application itself is made jointly by Meritor, who are the original landowners, but also now by Welsh Government because they are the new landowners of one of the sites at Meritor. So the report seeks authority to reach agreement with the applicant to modify the planning obligation as outlined in the report. And I need to make an amendment to the recommendation. Having said all that, we've said in our report the recommendation is to approve. What it should read, and this will be reflected in the minutes, is our recommendation is that authorisation be given to the Chief Planning and Public Protection Officer to reach an agreement to modify the Section 106 agreement on the basis of the Planning Officer's report. If there's any issues of clarification needed on that, please let me know at the end, but Craig will just present the actual report now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Over to Craig Mead now. Thank you.
Just go through a bit of background, because obviously, as Richard mentioned, this relates to an agreement signed in 2011 that was related to a plan application also submitted in 2011. So just for you to be aware, the site, it's the entire Arvin Meritor ownership on Grange Road, including the site that's been bought by Welsh Government, and obviously the Morrison's food store to the north. So background is the application was submitted back in March 2011, which was for a food store on Site 1 and links to the town centre, which is obviously the Morrison store, which has been operating since 2013. An outline application for partial development of Meritor's ownership, which is now owned by the Welsh Government, to demolish part of the factory and to build offices and a hotel with ancillary pub restaurant, and also deal with on-site contamination. And then Site 3, which is the Meritor factory, which is the southern end of the Meritor factory, where that would be remodelled, provision of a brake testing centre, and also decontamination of that part of the site. So a plan of the various ownerships. You can see, obviously, Site 1, the Morrisons to the north, Site 2 in the middle, which is the site now owned by Welsh Government, and the Meritor factory on the bottom, which is they've been working on internal remodelling, and are now, if you go past it now, you can see they're starting to break the existing factory from what is no longer needed. So when we dealt with the application back in 2011, there were a number of issues. Site contamination. Obviously, it had been in use since the 1930s. They were making gun turrets in the war, and there was underground contamination, so that was one of the major issues. How we could get the Meritor factory to remain on site and be remodelled as a modern manufacturing facility. How we could ensure that Site 2, which is the site owned by Welsh Government, could be delivered for the office development as applied for. How we could make sure that all three phases and sites work together, and how we could get integration with the town centre. And the way we did that was through a Section 106 agreement and an associated bond, which I'll explain on the next slide. So in order to ensure that we got those together, we entered into a Section 106 agreement with Meritor and with Morrisons that covered issues to when Site 2 was to be made available for development, works that needed to be done to Site 2 in order to clear the site, remove the buildings, remove the concrete slab on which the building sits, and carry out remediation so the site would be ready for somebody to come along at whatever date that site was no longer used by Meritor to bring forward development. And also undertake decontamination works on Site 3, which they were both obviously decontaminated through Meritor's use of the site. A bond was put in place between Meritor and the council. The amount of that bond was 7.5 million. And in order to release monies from that bond, Meritor had to put in the manufacturing equipment and various improvements to the manufacturing lines, which was being completed, and the amount of money was released from that bond. And there was money left over to deal with the contaminations on Site 2 and Site 3. And those works on Site 3 are happening at the moment. They're pumping stuff into the ground to release and clean up the contamination on that site. And also the bond was to cover making Site 2 ready for development, which was the demolition of the buildings, etc., mentioned on the previous slide. There's been some changes since 2011 in relation to how this application is viewed. There was an application in 2014 to extend the deadline for when information needed to be submitted for Site 2. Meritor weren't at the time ready to clear Site 2. They were still doing their internal work, so they wanted some extra time to submit that information to us. And as part of that application, we extended the deadline for those works on Site 2 to be completed to January 2017. And obviously, as Richard mentioned, Site 2 is now being bought by the Welsh Government. So, in relation to the application, or the modification of the Section 106 that's in front of you, we undertook some consultation, and the main consultations were with Natural Resources Wales, due to the contamination present on site. And their view is that there's no risk to control the waters under the site, and there's no requirement for remediation if the use approved, which was the offices, pub and restaurant, were brought forward. There wouldn't be any need for remediation. And also we had consultation with M&G as the owners of the town centre. They were heavily involved back in 2011 when we determined the application because of potential impact on the town centre for retail development outside the town centre. So their concerns in relation to what's in front of you were about the remediation of the site and its impact on delivery of Site 2. And they were concerned that in the future they may be required to put a higher use land value on there in order to cover those remediation costs. So we went back to the applicant, both applicants, to ask for some further information and clarification. And following that information, M&G, as the owners of the town centre, support the reduction of the bond, which is in the report in front of you. Just to go quickly through the assessment and conclusion of the application, Meritor's consultants have identified there's a low risk of remediation in the Site 2. The Council's consultant, Wally Parsons, who have looked at this application since 2011 and are well aware of what's on the site, have agreed with that suggestion, but they did suggest the Council should retain part of the bond that's on the site to cover any unforeseen contamination. The applicants come back and suggested that that is not needed. It's at the moment a normal brownfield site because there's a low risk of contamination. And they've also identified that Welsh Government, as owners of the site, have identified that if there is any contamination on that site, when they come forward to develop it, they will resolve and cover those contamination issues. They did ask for the slab removal date to remove from 2017 to 2019. As officers, we don't think that's necessary, and that it should remain as 2017. And as the site is now owned by a public body, the money there to remediate that site is no longer needed because the Welsh Government have identified they will cover any costs. So roughly the Section 106 header terms in terms of changes that are in front of you is to release the requirement for the bond to remain in place on Site 2, but to keep the requirement for the remediation works in place to ensure that that site is brought forward for development. As the applicant identified, they would have liked to have extended that date to 2019. We believe it should stay at 2017 at the moment because there's no proposal in place. And when we get closer to January 2017, we could review the need to extend that deadline if required. So going back to the recommendation, as Richard mentioned, is slightly different to what's written in your report, which is for you to give authorisation to the Chief Officer Planning and Public Protection to reach agreement with the joint applicants to modify the Section 106 agreement on the basis of the information in the report that you've received.
Thank you. Any questions, queries on that? No? Are you all satisfied with the explanation given? Good. Somebody like to make a proposal then? Yeah. Councillor Seaborn had his hand up first. Okay, let him propose it first.
Thank you, Chair. Madam Chair, I'd like to move the recommendation with the additional powers given to the senior officer as agreed previously.
Thank you. And it's seconded? Right. Well, it's up there for us all to see the exact wording. Shall we vote on it now? That's unanimous again, so that has been agreed to. Thank you. Right, agenda item 9, application number 15/P/00416, proposal for change of use of existing public library to B1 office use plus training facility, located at Blaenavon Library, Lion Street, Blaenavon, and is on pages 77 to 82. There's no presentation on this. application. So are there any questions or comments members would like to make? No? You're all satisfied with it? Can I have a proposal then? Your proposal? Yeah. Councillor Furzer?
Yeah. I propose we accept the officer's recommendations and the conditions laid down on page 81.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Right, 3 seconders. We're okay. So we'll go into a vote. That is unanimous again, so that application has been approved. So that's the last application. And the date of the next meeting is Tuesday, 15th of September, in the Council Chamber. Thank you all for your attendance and your contributions. Thank you.